couple years ago, in November of 2018, my family and I had the most incredible opportunity of all. We got to travel to Israel and explore the Holy Land where Jesus walked and talked, and the stories of the Bible, they came alive in a way I can't even describe. We had so many mind-blowing adventures as we traveled not with a tour group, but just the four of us in our own rental car. We stayed one night on the Mediterranean Sea and another at the Dead Sea. We shopped in local fruit markets and grocery stores. We were all baptized in the Jordan River where Jesus was baptized, visited Jesus' home base of Capernaum, and stood at the entrance of Hades where Jesus said the gates of hell will not prevail. We saw all the sights of Jerusalem, from the Western Wall to the Mount of Olives, from the upper room where Jesus had the Last Supper, to setting foot on the Temple Mount. We had unique adventures of taking a 1-hour camel ride in the Negev desert and hiking down 700 steps from the mountain fortress of Masada, and even bartering our way onto a boat to sail across the Sea of Galilee. But it was there at the Sea of Galilee where the most unexpected thing happened. We learned that Hamas, a terrorist group, launched over 400 rockets from the Palestinian-controlled area of Gaza into Israeli towns and communities in southern Israel. Most of the rockets were shot down, but damage was still done. We contacted our Airbnb owner and he said we were safe and that we only need to be concerned if Lebanon was planning to attack Israel. What? And then he said something so nonchalant. Just so you know, if you go out your front door, turn right and go about 10 feet, the bomb shelter is on your left. Who lives with knowing the location of your local bomb shelter? That was definitely a culture shock. Like those rockets that came seemingly out of nowhere into the night sky of southern Israel, there is another bombardment that has been happening in our world for some time. It's an attack on purity. When I was growing up, I remember there was a push to allow condoms into public schools, and our youth ministry made a concentrated effort to stand up against this attack. We even wore gold bracelets that said, "I will stand up until I say I do." My brother and his wife actually exchanged their bracelets at their wedding. While I know we were standing up for purity, what became the focus of everything during that time period was virginity, waiting to have sex before you're married. Something I can say with pride that Shem and I were able to do. The problem of focusing on virginity, though, is that you can lose the focus on something far more important, and that's purity. There are people who have not lost their virginity but have lost their purity, because purity is being free from contamination. But we are not merely dealing with purity in the same sense of in sexual intercourse. That's just one small slice of a far larger issue. Purity is more about one's whole life. If I was to slice your life into sections of home, work, church, community, friends, and so on, how would it look? Would it be the same in every area? Purity encompasses everything we've talked about so far in this study. The attitude we have, the words we say, the life we live, the love we share, and the faith we keep. Without purity, we can't live holy, holy lives. Without purity, our lives fall apart. Because it is only through purity that we can have integrity. And integrity is what keeps a loaf of bread together. Integrity is what keeps our life together. Lose integrity and you'll fall to pieces. Lose integrity and you lose purity. For 66 years, Daniel has kept his integrity intact, and even though he has had to live in a place he never intended to live and serve kings he never intended to serve, I believe Daniel chapter 6 reveals the secret ingredient to how he was able to do that, how he was able to live uncontaminated by the culture and customs of his world. I believe it also reveals the secret for your life and mine to be a pure one or an impure one, a holy one or an unholy one. Daniel was able to maintain his position and status from the Babylonian Empire to the Persian Empire. But how? Well, the quick answer is God. But the longer answer is we see how Daniel handled himself with wisdom in his early years when coming from Israel to Babylon, that he likely still did the same when the new king, Darius, showed up and conquered Babylon. Obviously, something impressed Darius enough about Daniel that he was going to give him the authority over the whole empire. His fellow officials, probably from Persia, couldn't believe that an exiled Jew who was living in Babylon would be given such a position So they tried to do what so many in our culture still do: find a place where integrity is lacking or purity is contaminated in one's public life. Here's what the Bible says they discovered. They couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. Can this be said about you and me in our public lives? Are we faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy? If we cannot say yes to all these questions, then we are not living holy lives, and we are lacking integrity and need to be decontaminated so we can be pure again. What is it that Daniel used to stay pure and maintain his integrity? His connection and relationship with God, or his time alone with God. But Daniel didn't merely have time with God once a day and check it off like it was on a to-do list. No, he saw that his connection with God was necessary to maintain throughout the day, so his integrity and purity stayed intact all day. Here's how it's mentioned in the chapter. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. These times alone with God for Daniel were like a heart sanitizer. It allowed Daniel to clean away any areas of his life that might have had even a hint of contamination to them. The sanitizing of his heart was so important that he did it 3 times a day, every day, regardless of the consequences. In his case, the consequences, continuing to pray and sanitize his heart, were certain death in a lion's den. But that was not as important as his integrity and purity. How important is your integrity? How important is your purity? Do you do whatever it takes to maintain them or give them up at the sign of any trouble? Things have certainly not been easy in the midst of all we've faced in 2020. But one thing has proven true. We must keep our connection with God strong and our time with Him consistent if we are to be able to set apart and different than our divisive culture. It is only through the sanitizing and purifying of our hearts on a consistent, multiple times a day basis that we'll be able to face down insurmountable odds and come out unscathed like Daniel did from his lion's den encounter. Here's something you may not know. It is very possible that the events of Daniel 6 and the lion's den spurred on the actions of King Darius' counterpart, King Cyrus, to let Ezra lead the Jews back home to begin to return to Israel and rebuild their temple and their homeland once again. What if Daniel had stopped sanitizing his heart, maintaining his integrity, and keeping his purity intact? Would the Jews have been allowed back home? This shows that your choice to live a holy life doesn't just affect you. It affects even those you may never meet. And it shows that your choice not to live a holy life affects those all around you too. Just ask the families who were tossed into the lion's den with their men who lacked integrity and had impure hearts, trying to deceive the king and catch Daniel in the very acts they committed. I pray as this study concludes today and you finish your time together that you will continue to do one thing. Be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, your faith, and your purity. And choose to live a holy life, even in this unholy land.